each of our candidates 1 minute to respond, and I'll rotate who gets to go first. Gil, since you're closest to me, we're going to start. You go first on this one. And basically here, the 39th District is one of the most racially diverse congressional districts in the country, and definitely here in California as well. And we know that there's a ton of racism in our communities. So I'm sort of curious, like, what can the federal government actually do to address this problem? And in particular, we know a lot of our young people here in the 39th are very aware of how broken our criminal justice system is, and I would say even racist. And what would you do if you were in Congress to reform the system?
Well, there's a few things we can do, right? I mean, first thing I think we need to do is reinstate the Voter Rights Act that's prohibiting people of color from voting all across the country. But what we really need in this country is leaders that are going to lead on this issue and be an example, not a president who's going to defend the racist people when they go and protest with their torches, no matter where it might be in the country. We need leaderships in Congress, leaders in Congress that are going to go and step up to defend people of color, defend the oppressed people, no matter where they might be or where they might come from. And that's a leadership that I'm gonna take to Washington. I'm gonna use my bully pulpit to go out there and defend people because, you know, I've been a victim of racism. I've gone and I've been accused of you know, look, just because of the color of my skin that I can't do this or I can't do that, and people limit me because of that. And that's something that we need to change in this country, and it's going to change first with attitude and with leadership.
Awesome, thanks. Sam.
So I'm half Latino and half Arab American, so depending on the day of the week, Donald Trump is tweeting something unfortunate about my background in one way or the other. But it does come down to that leadership and having voices of inclusion. Because this is a diverse community, it's a very diverse country, and right now we have a president that's just trying to define people by their backgrounds and divide us. And so I think first and foremost we need to make sure our civil rights laws are being enforced. The Civil Rights Division under Jeff Sessions is being crippled, and we need to make sure that that's enforcing the law. We also need to look at expanding the law where it's possible. For example, if you're LGBTQ, you can still be fired in your workplace for that. We need to expand the Civil Rights Act. In addition, we need to pass an Equal Rights Amendment. We also need to make sure our law enforcement's trained so that we don't have situations where there's distrust in communities. And lastly, I'd look at immigration. We need to solve our immigration reform system. We need to pass comprehensive immigration reform and make sure that it's not the case where people live in fear of their status. If their parents are at home, what happens if they don't come home? And so a lot of it really is leadership at the top and making some of those fixes on the bottom to show that this is an inclusive and welcoming country.
Awesome, thanks. Andy.
Well, I started my activist career as a co-founder of a chapter of CORE, the Congress of Racial Equality, in college. And so this is a fight that's been going on for decades, obviously, for racial equality and equality for other minorities. But I do think all of these questions have two levels. There's a level of leadership and there's a level of legislation. You need to pass legislation and enforce legislation, making all forms of discrimination illegal. You need to enforce those laws. But as everyone else has said, it does start with leadership. And I think of racism and all other forms of discrimination as a form of a virus. And how do you eliminate a virus from society? You inoculate each generation. And as you inoculate generation after generation, the virus disappears. And we've done that with smallpox. And we weren't doing it with racism. In my lifetime, the amount of overt racism, in Karen's lifetime, the amount of overt racism has gone way down. But Trump has brought it back. And we were getting close to the point where as we inoculate each generation, you get less and less racism in society. And so it absolutely requires that all of us commit ourselves from the top down to living the type of life that sets an example that everyone needs to be treated equally. And legislation is part of that solution.
Awesome.